It feels like every time someone tries to hold Chris Brown accountable, they are not just going up against him, they are going up against an entire army of fans, millions deep. Imagine trying to speak the truth while dodging 14 million digital arrows. And now here we are again, watching Karrueche Tran's name trend. Not because she made a bold new move, but because people are speculating she might return to the same man who once had a 5-year restraining order against him for threatening her life. That was not a spat. That was serious. That was survival. What is it about Chris Brown that keeps pulling women back in, even after everything? There is no easy way to explain it. It is not just about love or fame or second chances. It feels like something deeper, more troubling. We should be asking why these cycles keep repeating, and what kind of world allows women to walk back into places they once had to escape from. This is not about judging the woman. It is about questioning the patterns, the influence, and the silence that surrounds it. It's becoming more disturbing to watch the pattern of harm and forgiveness surrounding Chris Brown, especially how it keeps pulling women back in, even after they've gone through deeply traumatic experiences. We saw it with Rihanna. After the brutal incident where she was physically hurt and allegedly had her head slammed between a washer and dryer, many thought she would leave for good. The damage was clear, not just physically, but emotionally. It was a public incident, unforgettable for everyone who witnessed it. Yet, despite everything, Rihanna eventually went back to him, as if trying to rewrite a painful chapter that had already been written. Now, years later, Karrueche Tran is going through something eerily similar. She had spoken out about the harm she endured from Chris Brown, even going so far as to legally protect herself by getting a restraining order. For a while, it seemed like she was truly done with his toxic behavior. She had moved on, taken control of her life, and appeared to be in a better place. But recently at Coachella, Karrueche was seen laughing, smiling, and engaging with him, almost as if everything that had happened before no longer mattered. To the outside world, it looked like she was back in the same unhealthy space she had fought so hard to leave. It made many wonder if she was drawn back into his orbit because of the attention he's still getting. Chris Brown, despite all the damage he's caused in his past relationships, has managed to maintain a level of public affection. This is especially true as he continues to perform and stay relevant in the public eye. Karrueche, being someone who has lived through both the pain and the publicity that come with being associated with him, might feel like this attention is something she wants, or at least something she can't easily ignore. In a world where the media and public opinions constantly shift, where trauma is often forgotten or minimized, maybe proximity to Chris seems like the easier or safer option than standing alone. But the situation isn't just about who is dating whom or who is seen together. It's about the bigger issue of how society continues to normalize returning to harm. It's about how women who survive violence are often pulled back into relationships with their abusers, whether physically or emotionally, because of a culture that frequently forgives and overlooks the damage. What's even more troubling is how society seems to forget the trauma, brushing it off as something that can be easily patched up without truly acknowledging the deep scars that remain. This cycle of forgiveness and harm is damaging, not just for the women involved, but for society as a whole. When we see Karrueche reconnecting with Chris Brown, it's easy to get caught up in the surface-level drama or speculate on their personal lives. But what we should be asking is why this keeps happening. Why does society continue to make it so easy for him to be forgiven? Why do we keep allowing people who have caused harm to continue to be praised and given second chances, while the ones who have been hurt are often forgotten or blamed? Women who survive abuse face an enormous challenge in healing. It's a long and difficult journey, often made harder by the constant pressure and expectations of others. There's a lot of talk about moving on, but the reality is that healing doesn't work on a set timeline. It's messy, it's complicated, and sometimes the wounds never fully heal. Yet for some reason, when it comes to certain figures like Chris Brown, there's an expectation that everything should be forgiven and forgotten, that the damage done should be overlooked because they are talented or famous, or because the public feels like they have already suffered enough. This situation highlights the bigger problem in how we treat survivors of violence. We seem to be more interested in the drama, the public spectacle, than in understanding the long-lasting effects of trauma. We forget that every time someone goes back to an abuser, it isn't just about love or forgiveness. It's about a complicated web of emotions, fear, manipulation, and sometimes an overwhelming need for acceptance. The truth is that Karrueche, like anyone else, deserves to heal and find happiness on her own terms. People have been whispering, speculating, and even pleading behind the scenes. Some say friends and family have been nudging Karrueche Tran to give Chris Brown another chance. And then, just a few days ago, the rumors caught fire. The two were spotted at Coachella, sharing laughs and vibing like old wounds had somehow healed themselves in silence. To many, this was a shocker. Their relationship goes way back to 2012, but their breakup was anything but quiet. Karrueche accused Chris, not just of cheating, but of repeated domestic violence. It was public, it was painful, and it made headlines. What complicated things even more was the timing. She began dating him shortly after Rihanna's highly publicized split from him, following his violent attack on her. That decision painted a target on Karrueche's back. Instead of being met with empathy or support, she was scrutinized. People questioned her judgment. They victim blamed her. They wondered how she could possibly fall for a man with such a violent past. But what they failed to see, what people often miss, is how complicated these situations really are. Love, trauma, manipulation, fame, they do not operate in straight lines. And when a person is in the middle of it all, with the world watching and weighing in, the lines between right, wrong, and survival get blurred. The real question is not just about why she went back. It is about why society keeps making it so difficult for women to stay away. People could not wrap their heads around it. How could Karrueche, after everything that had already happened with Rihanna, agree to date Chris Brown? To many, it felt like walking into a house already on fire and somehow expecting not to get burned. The danger was visible, the past was public, and yet she stepped in. What made it all even messier was that during her relationship with Chris, he briefly rekindled things with Rihanna. Karrueche was caught in the crossfire of a love triangle that played out in the spotlight. That was not just a betrayal, it was deeply humiliating. And then, as if the situation needed another twist, news broke that Chris had fathered a child, royalty, with another woman while still connected to Karrueche. But the most alarming part came later, in court documents obtained by TMZ. Karrueche revealed that Chris had been making terrifying threats, telling people close to him that he wanted to kill her. She said he told his circle that if he could not have her, no one else would. These were not just angry words in a heated moment. These were threats of control, obsession, and violence. This is no longer about messy breakups or celebrity drama. This is about safety, about the very real fear that women live with when someone refuses to let go. Karrueche's story is not unique, but it is a glaring example of how society often minimizes abuse until it is too late. And while some judged her for ever giving him a chance, the bigger issue lies in how power, fame, and charm continue to shield harmful behavior from real accountability. The more you peel back the layers of Karrueche Tran's history with Chris Brown, the darker it gets. And it is not just about a messy relationship. It is about a pattern of control, violence, and manipulation that is deeply disturbing. In court, Karrueche revealed that Chris had threatened to take her life, even saying he would take her out and shoot her. She also said he had physically assaulted her in the past, punching her in the stomach not once but twice, and shoving her down a flight of stairs. All of this while he was still on probation for nearly beating Rihanna to death. Let that sink in. He was already supposed to be under legal watch, already supposed to be making amends, and yet the cycle of harm continued. Chris did not stop at physical abuse. He weaponized fear and guilt. He even posted a disturbing video online saying that if his girlfriend ever left him for someone else, he would do everything in his power to make her life miserable. His message was chillingly clear. If he could not have her, no one would. In court, Karrueche also shared text, messages he sent her, messages that stripped away any illusion of care or remorse. He demanded she return the diamond rings and gifts he had given her, claiming he was done being nice. But what kindness was ever present? The diamonds were not love. They were tools in the cycle of abuse. Love bombing her with gifts after hurting her, only to demand them back as soon as she stood up for herself. One of the texts read, word for word, "I'm not being nice to you no more. If I see you out in public again and I'm there, I will make..." The truth is, most victims of domestic violence do not come forward until they feel safe. Karrueche herself admitted she stayed silent out of fear, real, life-threatening fear. And even after she left, he continued to stalk and harass her. That was the final push that led her to court, where she sought a 5-year restraining order, which was later granted. When the popular page Baller Alert reported on the restraining order, Chris lashed out in the comments, claiming that Karrueche and her team were using his past case with Rihanna to paint him as violent. He even admitted he pled guilty in Rihanna's case, then tried to distance himself from the narrative of being dangerous, despite his own actions echoing that pattern time and time again. The reality is this: abuse does not always end when the relationship does. And just because someone is famous, talented, or charismatic does not mean they are not capable of causing serious harm. Karrueche's story is a sobering reminder of how difficult it is for survivors to be believed, even when they have the evidence in hand. To do the same with Karrueche because he didn't touch her. and she's just using him for clout to boost. Chris Brown's public response to Karrueche Tran's legal action was filled with deflection, frustration, and denial. Instead of addressing the seriousness of the allegations, he turned the focus onto Karrueche and her team, accusing them of using his past to boost her career. In one of his rants, he wrote, "I'm so sick of these thirsty adults. Her team is trying their best for what? No one has served me anything. The lengths they're going, I should call them stalkers." Rather than reflecting on his actions or showing remorse, he framed himself as the victim, suggesting that Karrueche and her team were out to manipulate public opinion and reignite old wounds for attention. What disturbed many was his reference to his own past, where he said they were playing off my past by saying I touched her, as if using his history of abuse to invalidate the new claims. He called it some evil-ish and accused people of trying to bait him into reacting so they could spin it into more content. In his eyes, this was all about publicity. "Notice this always happens when they need to promote something," he said, implying that the timing of Karrueche's claims was strategically linked to media attention. "No one cares, especially me. That's why I'm being slandered," he added, painting himself as someone under attack for simply wanting to move on. But what Chris failed to acknowledge, or maybe chose to ignore, is that when someone speaks out about abuse, especially after years of silence, it is rarely about promotion. It is about protection, closure, and reclaiming power that was taken away. His comments, instead of clearing his name, only deepened concerns. Rather than offering accountability, they came off as attempts to silence and shame a survivor, someone who had already endured far too much, both in private and in public. Chris Brown's reaction to Karrueche Tran's legal action took a defensive and deflective turn. Instead of acknowledging the gravity of the situation, he doubled down on denial and self-preservation, insisting that she and her team were out to ruin him. In a public outburst, he claimed, "No one would care about them if my name wasn't involved. I want nothing to do with her." He went on to say that he did not need a restraining order placed against him. In fact, he needed one from them. The irony of an alleged abuser flipping the narrative to position himself as the threatened party was hard to ignore. Chris continued, "I will not just accept papers from any lawyer. I will not go to court to admit guilt to further tarnish who I am. I pled guilty in the Rihanna case because I was. I refuse to allow these evil-hearted people to label me a lie just because they think it'll skyrocket their career. Just stay away from me." He framed Karrueche's plea for safety as a career move, completely dismissing her fear, her evidence, and the years of trauma she had shared. Instead of introspection or accountability, he offered indignation. In his world, her truth was an attack, and his past was something being used against him. As if all of that were not heavy enough, Chris weaponized his music. He released songs, most notably residuals, that were widely believed to be about Karrueche. And somehow, instead of the public standing behind her, a disturbing number of fans romanticized it. The song was embraced, and suddenly the conversation turned from what he did to her to how sweet the song sounded. People began urging her to take him back, as if a love song could undo years of violence and threats. Let that settle in. While she was still navigating trauma, while the courts were involved, while she was asking for distance and protection, he was turning her pain into melodies, and people were dancing to it. Even worse, as Karrueche tried to move forward, she found herself dragged back into the chaos. Despite everything, restraining orders, public evidence, and court testimony, she was once again reduced to the role of the ex-girlfriend who just could not stay away. Instead of a survivor doing everything she could to break free from a cycle, when Chris and Karrueche bumped into each other recently, the encounter seemed to leave everyone scratching their heads. After years of avoiding him, especially following the abuse and the restraining order, Karrueche showed up with a totally different energy. She was laughing loudly at his jokes, almost exaggerating her reactions, and engaging in a way that was hard to ignore, especially for people who had watched their toxic history unfold in the public eye. It was like all of the love songs Chris had been putting out about her finally worked. Despite the drama, the threats, and everything that had transpired between them, there she was, laughing and playfully interacting with him like nothing had happened. This sudden shift in behavior immediately raised eyebrows, as fans and onlookers began to question what exactly was going on. The timing and the nature of the encounter were curious. Karrueche had been avoiding Chris since 2017, a long stretch where she had clearly distanced herself from his chaos. So to see her seemingly drop all the walls she had built up over the years left many wondering, was this a moment of genuine reconciliation, or was she simply caught up in the moment? Regardless, it created a buzz, and the public couldn't help but speculate on what was behind this new dynamic between them. As the public watched Karrueche and Chris interact, the opinions started pouring in. Some people even went as far as telling her to stop acting tough and just give Chris a second chance. This was especially shocking given the history between them. Remember, he had threatened to end her life during their breakup. Yet, there were still those who believed that maybe, just maybe, Chris had changed and deserved another shot. One person even went as far as saying, "If they get back together, I think he'll do right this time. Hey, take him back, it's okay." But not everyone was buying into this advice. Some voices of reason pushed back, with one particularly thoughtful person calling out the absurdity of it all. They said, pushing a healed woman to go back to what caused her to start her healing journey in the first place is wild business. And honestly, that perspective hit differently. It was a reminder that healing is a process, not something that can be undone by a momentary lapse in judgment or the pressure of nostalgia. The situation made it clear that while people love to offer unsolicited advice, true healing and growth can't be rushed or forced, especially when the damage in a relationship has been so deep. Karrueche's journey, her choices, and her healing should never be minimized or treated as just another narrative to play out for public entertainment. It's honestly a tough situation when you think about Karrueche and Chris linking up at Coachella. On one hand, people change, and perhaps there's a sense of nostalgia or even closure for her in seeing him again. But on the other hand, there's a lot of pain in their past. The emotional and physical toll Chris caused her shouldn't just be swept under the rug because of a few pleasant interactions or some love songs. Healing from such trauma takes time, and it's not something that should be rushed or minimized. The idea of going back to someone who has hurt you so deeply, especially when they've crossed major lines like abuse, should never be encouraged. It's concerning to see anyone suggest that she should overlook the things he did just because he's